Welcome to I Caught It on Audio. This is Ride or Die Episode 1, Weezer.
All right, welcome back. Happy New Year. We've got another Got It on Audio podcast here. Today's topic is Ride or Die, Weezer. It's inspired by an SNL skit from a few years ago with Matt Damon, where his character insists that all of Weezer's collection is worth listening to, and Leslie Jones and him go head to head on that. And we thought as Weezer fans, we thought we'd have a little discussion about that as well. So yeah, Dan, what are your thoughts on this? What do you?
I definitely love. I mean, the first two albums, of course. 94. We were in high school when the Blue album came out, and one of my favorite albums ever. I loved Pinkerton, and then when the Green album came out, I really enjoyed that one. And then what was next? Maladroit, I think. Yeah, Maladroit was next. I bought that one. I liked that one. And then Make Believe came out, and I was like, great, another Weezer album. And I kind of liked it at first, but I kind of soured on it. And then at that point, I was basically out on Weezer. I did not pay any attention to any of the albums after that. So when we talked about this, I was like, all right, well, let's go listen to them all. And we kind of talked about we'd all check them all out. And so I went through and listened to them all. And for me, it's kind of hit or miss. I think perhaps unsurprisingly, the ones that sound more like the first two or three albums I enjoy more. And the ones that like, for example, the ones that I really don't like very much upon listening, going through them, were the Red album. Well, the Red album was okay. Ratitude, Hurley, Pacific Daydream, and the Black album. They don't sound enough like Weezer to me. I mean, they obviously sound like Weezer. It's Rivers singing and crunchy guitars and stuff. Although not that much on those as some of the other ones, but they sound like pop albums, and not just in the sound, but in like what they're trying to do. It sounds like they're trying to make songs that will be hits, which I think.
Yeah,
go ahead.
The first three albums, I think we can all agree, are pretty solid albums. You got the Blue album, Pinkerton, and the Green album, and those were the ones that were out when we were in college. We were all young, or high school and college. We were all young. We saw, I think, three of us all together saw a concert in Kalamazoo where the Green album was the touring album, and yeah. I think it's pretty universal that we all think those are good. Now, Jamie continued to get the Weezer albums after that. She got Maladroit, Make Believe, and then I got her Ratitude. I don't even know how we skipped over Red album, but I didn't even know it had come out, honestly. But I agree that there was definitely a decline in quality after the first three. But that said, the ones I'm looking through my playlist here of all the Weezer albums, and I went through and I deliberately thumbs upped the songs that I liked as I listened to these as the last 15 years worth of albums, or however long it's been. And I've got some good. The White album turned out pretty good. Van Weezer turned out pretty good. And Hurley was a disaster. That was a pretty terrible album. But Ratitude and Make Believe and Maladroit all have a ton of thumbs up on them. And I think it's because Weezer's, for me, it's the kind of band where the more you listen to it, the more enjoyable it is with the songs. It just kind of, I don't know how to put it, but it's definitely the albums that I've listened to the most that have the most thumbs up, and I don't think that's a coincidence. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, same. I don't know how we skipped over the Red album, but I didn't even really know it existed until later. And I enjoy Ratitude, and I enjoy Make Believe in addition to the first 3 or 4 albums. I can't really pick out anything on the Red album that I like, except for Pork and Beans that's on the radio, and I don't know that I like it as much as I recognize it. I guess listening to the rest of it was a chore until I got to Van Weezer. I really, really liked Van Weezer.
Yeah, there was something special about that one. I can't put my finger on it either.
Well, I think, I like the sound. And then in addition to that, it sounded more like they stopped trying. Like, it really bugs me, I guess. All of the songs that they write about being a rock band and how hard it is to be a rock band
Yeah.
and how, I don't know, the kind of the whiny ones. And that bugs me a little bit. And I try to think about other bands that maybe write about being rock bands, and nothing's coming to me right now, but Weezer just sounds whinier.
Yeah.
in their effort to, I don't know, convey what it's like to be a rock band. But by the time I got to Van Weezer, I was like, okay, I like this one. It sounds more like they're just writing and not trying to convey a message so much.
Well, it feels like after Pacific Daydream specifically, you've got the Black Album, OK Human, and Van Weezer. And those 3 albums have very distinct sounds. And it's kind of like he was writing all 3 of them. I assume Rivers writes everything, and if that's not true, sorry to the other guys, but that's just kind of the way it feels towards the end here. And he's like, I'm going to put out a metal album, and that's going to be Van Weezer. It's going to be obvious that it's a metal album with the lightning on the cover and, the Van Halen reference in the title and the big guitars and everything. And then I'm going to write my alternative album that's going to be kind of a tribute to Radiohead with OK Human. And he's going to be terrible at it because OK Human's pretty garbage. I do like all my favorite songs, and I do like Bird with a Broken Wing, but other than that, I didn't particularly care for it. And then I don't know what he was trying to do with the Black Album. I only got one song in there that I even liked, and that was Can't Knock the Hustle, and that's just I kind of liked the groove in that one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those three albums, the last 3, definitely had a very distinct and specific feel to them. Like he was trying to write a very specific thing, and some of it worked. The more 80s guitar obviously was the one that Jamie and I at least liked. And then the other 2 were pretty not that great. And Pacific Daydream I would put in that category as well. Though I had 3 on Pacific Daydream. But yeah, he's, like you said, Jamie, he's got these tropes where he's got the song about the girl, like Weekend Woman and Precious Metal Girl. He's got that on every single album. Like, I've got to have my song about the special girl. And then he's got to have his whining about the band, being in a band and how hard it is, and on every album in these later ones. It's just, and then he's got the reminiscing one, like Memories and what is it? Heart Songs. He's got one of those on every album too. And some of them work. Like I like Heart Songs off the Red album. I thought the Red album was actually pretty good. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the whining about. I mean, his voice sounds a little whiny always, and that's just
Yeah.
part of it. And so you kind of like have to make a little peace with that. But it works when okay, maybe there's diminishing returns no matter what, but I think it works better with the first few albums because they're younger and you haven't heard it a million times.
Right.
And you talk about the Jamie, you mentioned the complaining about being in a band, and Dave, you mentioned that too. Yeah, I agree. I mean, on Pinkerton, you know, when we're doing I want to go back, you're like, it's kind of like this novel little idea in The Good Life where you're like, oh, okay, you've kind of lost your way. And you know, when you know the backstory where he's at Harvard and you know he's kind of miserable, and you know he has his surgery and all this stuff, you're like, okay, yeah, you remember the good times from the last album, and that's cool. Like I you know, everyone has that feeling like, oh, I remember when we used to go all get together and do stuff. It's too bad we don't do that anymore. And you're like, okay, that's a cool theme. And then you do it, you know, when you're like, you know, 47 and you've already done it. You've already said that. And then you're saying it again. And you're like, okay, yeah, but maybe stop complaining about it and do it. or stop living in the past. You know, that's the other option. And so it's like, whatever, you write about whatever you want to write about it. He has the right to do that, of course. But, it seems really repetitive. Like, and I think the real problem I have with Weezer after Maladroit is it stops feeling in any way personal and authentic. It sounds like he's trying to write songs.
Right. It's a derivative of previous Weezer albums.
Yeah, and that's how he makes his money. So, okay, you know, that's what he wants to do with his life. There's nothing wrong with that. But it all, and you know, lyrically, he's not great. I mean, he can be, but when he tries to write something, it's like he kind of has figured out and analyzed what worked on the first two albums specifically. Because I mean, the Green Album, I like it, but if it came out, you know, if it came out in 2021 and you shoved Van Weezer back in 2001, I almost feel like they're a little interchangeable as far as their sort of directness. I mean, I think the Green Album's probably the third best album, and it's probably not that close. But I don't think it's nearly as good as their first two. When you look at everything that's happened since then, I think when Make Believe is when it really starts to feel like there's an inauthenticity, you know. I mean, I don't know. That's just my perception on that, I suppose. But the other thing to look at too is I think it was Ratitude. I'm just gonna look real quick here to make sure I get this right. Yeah, Ratitude is when he started bringing in like pop songwriters to work with, and from that point on, every album has pretty much he's collaborating with some sort of like person that writes hits, which really betrays, you know, his intention, which is fine, you know. You know, that's okay. I think maybe like OK Human and Van Weezer might be an exception to varying degrees, I guess. But and you know, there's nothing wrong with you know, deciding to work together, but every time you see that a band that's made it, and then later on, like Aerosmith is a good example that comes to mind. They start working with songwriters, and that's fine. It creates hits, it creates results, you know, like that's good. But it's, as with Weezer, with Aerosmith, it's hard for me to love those songs. Like in the long term, they don't feel like as honest. They feel like they're trying to write hits. And they're just that lack of authenticity is I think a thing I have an issue with Weezer.
Yeah, there's definitely a decline as you go through, and I wonder if um, like I don't think the Red album is categorically a bad album, and I wonder if that had come out when we were in high school, if I would have fonder feelings of it, but or if it had been first, because it has a lot of similarities, I think, to the basic feel of the early era Weezer stuff. Um, I just wonder how much of my perception of them is I'm in high school, everything's new, music is really exciting now. So of course I love the entire Blue album and I love the entire Pinkerton. And you know what? Green is just more of the Blue album, so that's pretty cool too. Um, and then we move on and things are just getting worse and worse because it's just it's just derivative of stuff that he's already written. And like I would definitely say that In the Garage is the best of his whiny band being in a band songs, because it's amazing and I love it and I listened to it when I was 13 and and maybe it's also like you said earlier, Dan, because it's when they were young, so it comes off as authentic.
Yeah.
Well, I have a couple of points. So, first of all, I love the Blue album, and I still love it today. And when we were kind of listening to all these songs, like I said, it was work, and then so I didn't start at the beginning. I started at the Red album because that's the one I didn't know. And so by the time I got all the way through listening on my way to work every day, then I put on the Blue album and it was just kind of like, oh, this is my reward. This is my, my, my treat for listening to all of this. And, I really do love the Blue album. And I think, I don't know. I think that it's just something special. It's different than the others for me. And then Dan, you were saying, when you were talking about Pinkerton and knowing the backstory and being at Harvard and all that, I don't know the backstory. Like that's not really the way that I listen to music. I just listen, and you both know, like I put a CD on when I had CDs in my car, and I would listen over and over and over and just let it go.
Yep.
And that's kind of the way that I listen to music. And then once I feel like something else or get sick of it, then I put something else on. And the way that I kind of decide whether I like a song or not is, can I sing it? That's one thing, because I sing in my car. And I don't know, does it just resonate with me in some way? I don't usually look at, the notes on the album. I don't learn about the band usually. And that's all interesting. And I do enjoy knowing things like that. It's just not something that I search out. So I definitely listen differently, I think, than both of you. And that's maybe why, like Gratitude and Make Believe, I enjoy more because I'll listen to them and they're catchy. Like you say, they're writing songs to be heard, to be listened to. And so I enjoy those. So I don't know. I just not knowing and maybe not getting all of the references. Like I definitely got Van Weezer and Okay Human. I didn't even know that was the title of the album, but Dave said that. And it was kind of like, oh, that's like familiar. I didn't equate that album to like a nod to Radiohead because it just really isn't. I mean, aside from the title, they're just so different. But it definitely has a different sound. You agree about?
Yeah, no, I agree that it doesn't really remind me of Radiohead at all. I'm not sure what his actual intent was with naming it that, other than maybe experimentation, because it's just like like pop rock songs with orchestra,
Mm-hmm.
and I think its charm is only in that it's a very different and very specific decision. Not I'm going to write pop or rock songs in a certain style, but let's have an orchestra for all these songs. I think where it falls down is that all the songs kind of sound the same. That was my impression anyway. There's just not. I don't need half an hour of that. I know half an hour is not a lot of time for an album, but I feel like one or two songs is all you need.
That's the nice thing about a Weezer album too, is you're only committing half an hour. So
yeah, they keep it short.
If it goes wrong, like it'll be over soon. Much.
Yeah, no, I agree. Van Weezer, and it's like it's almost because it's a full commitment to, we're gonna write a themed album, like even more so with these last two albums than their previous sort of like, oh, we're gonna write songs like on the Black Album that are more like electro pop sort of inspired or something. I don't know exactly what you want to call that, but that one's awful to me. I did not like the Black Album. Black Album.
Yeah, no, I Can't Knock the Hustle for some reason. I don't. There was something about the groove, but the rest of it, I agree, was pretty hard to get through.
But I feel like on a having listened to it a couple of times on initial listen, I liked the idea behind OK Human, although it just sounds too samey. I feel like if you're going to have that, then you need to break it up a bit. But Van Weezer was fun, It doesn't feel like a serious album, but that's okay. It's just a change of pace, I can enjoy it on a different level. And just Jamie to mention, you talked about, like the story behind Pinkerton and stuff. When I usually only start like exploring that stuff after I enjoy an album, because I'm like, I want to know more.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's, I didn't spend any time, at any point, like looking up how Rivers was feeling during Ratitude, because I didn't like it.
Right. Right.
So to some extent, if I'm really into a band or an album, I'm like, oh yeah, let me just read about this. It's just something I can do to help me. It's kind of like bonus features on a DVD,
Yeah.
But I don't watch the commentary on movies that I hate.
Really?
I haven't watched. Oh my God, can you imagine the commentary? Oh, that would be the worst.
Get all those actors together and have them talk about how important what they did would be a nightmare.
How significant. And to be honest, we may have listened to it and I just forgot, because every time we watch it, we always forget.
Mm-hmm.
That's the worst. Anyway, so I think in the end, Weezer's formula for me definitely worked. Like Dave said, when we were 15 when Blue Album came out, so we were like prepped up for that sort of like, a little bit of childlike wonder, mixed with some crunchy guitars and sort of like, slightly outsidery, lyrics, a little bit of humor mixed in. That hit us just right. And I still think if I heard that album for the first time today, I could probably enjoy it, because I think the humor isn't super forced feeling. And I really love the other thing to talk about, which, they mentioned the sketches. There's the Matt Sharp factor. I do think having a different like voice, and not literally and figuratively, is very helpful for those first two albums. And although the Green Album is great, it's a very pared down, straight ahead. All the solos are just the melody from the vocal. There's no frills. It's still very good, but it's a step down for me, partly because it doesn't have the playfulness, and it also takes a step back on the vocal harmonies, which were really enjoyable in the first two. And it's not like they don't use harmonies after that. I just don't think it's focused on as much, and that's probably because there wasn't another singer, kind of main singer guy to really balance stuff out and make it more interesting.
So, are you ride or die Weezer?
I'm not. Now, one thing I do wonder is, would the one album that's outside of those first three that I still enjoy, Maladroit, I just bought it because it was the new Weezer album, and at the time I was like, cool. That one may arguably be interchangeable with some of their later ones entirely, and I don't know. That might be the sort of it's when you hear it, not whether what you think of it. But I still like that one. I just don't. I mean, if you ask me what my essential Weezer is, it's just the first two. The Green Album and Maladroit are ones I enjoy as well, but I can live without them.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, we bought Maladroit and Make Believe, and then I got you, Jamie, Gratitude, because it came with a Snuggie, a Weezer Snuggie. Like I bought the Snuggie, and that's the only reason we wound up with Gratitude, which is probably how we skipped the Red album. Now that I'm thinking about Snuggie. It, there's no Red Snuggie came with it. And I didn't even know about. I mean, I figured they were probably still releasing music, but I don't remember hearing anything after Gratitude on the radio at all.
Yeah, I had no idea the number of songs and albums that were out there. I knew that there were some new Weezer songs on the radio here and there, and I had no clue that what I would be getting myself into.
Yeah.
And initially when I watched the SNL skit, I was on Matt Damon's side, right? Yeah, Weezer, and that's based mainly on the first two albums, I think. And so I went into it thinking yeah, I'm probably ride or die Weezer. And I just, I was trying so hard to listen and to the other albums, and I just, some of them I just didn't at all. Yeah. I was annoyed. Why is this what you put out?
Yeah.
You owe me better music.
I know.
Yeah, no, honestly.
And so Van Weezer might not be a great album, standalone, but by the time I got to Van Weezer, I'm okay, here we go. This is more what I was expecting. So, by itself, I don't know that it's a great album, but it was more what I was expecting, I'll say, of the other albums.
Yeah,
it doesn't help that
I wouldn't say that I'm ride or die for Weezer, but I do have a bunch of stuff from the later, the last 15 years that are thumbs up here, and they're going to come up, when my thumbs up playlist is on shuffle, and I'll listen to them because they're fun songs, but I definitely don't need to, buy an album and put it in my car and listen to it straight through over and over again with any of these other ones, like I would have with the Blue album or Pinkerton or even the Green album. So I think I'm more in the Leslie Jones camp on this one. I am not ride or die like Matt Damon.
Yeah, so I only watched the skit once, and she's not saying she's not a Weezer fan.
No,
she's done after the first couple of albums.
Yeah, right? They both agree Weezer is the best band of all time. And then she goes on and says, and then they're the worst.
Yeah, which is a good line. She says, I think she says that Weezer died when Matt Sharp left the band, which is the camp that I'm in. Now, I still enjoyed the next couple albums, but then Matt Damon says Weezer didn't begin until Scott Schreiner joined the band, and I'm like, no, Matt Damon, I'm sorry, that's just you're just trying to make me angry now. That's craziness. I do think that the warm glow of nostalgia helps inform our enjoyment of particularly the Green Album, Maladroit, but also, the Blue Album, Pinkerton. That helps when you hear it. It helps that it's that album that you remember from all those good times back when you were a teenager. But I also think there's a quality drop. And like I mentioned, there's a you feel like he's being. I mean, the Blue Album feels like a bunch of great ideas that he had been percolating in his head for a couple of years, all coming out, along with working with Matt Sharp. Pinkerton feels like a really honest, like maybe a little too honest description of his feelings. Green Album is just like super condensed Blue Album into the bare essentials, eliminating, all any sort of like extra frippery. And then from that point on, he starts to feel like he's searching for, how am I going to do this the rest of my life? And I just don't think he's 100% successful. And sometimes he's rather unsuccessful with that pursuit in the 20 years that follow.
Yep.
So one thing that, Dave didn't include the Teal album because it's covers, and I didn't know that was even out there. And with the SNL skit, when Matt Damon says, "Oh, this is the Africa cover, Weezer cover in Africa," I was kind of like, "What in the world?" And there is, though, at least one cover in the playlist, because it's on Hurley, and it's "Viva La Vida." And I just found that really, really odd that they covered that. And
it's one of the few songs that I thumbs down.
Yeah. And it doesn't, like, when you cover something, you're supposed to bring a new take. That's my interpretation. And they just don't. And I have heard a couple of the songs from the Teal album just because YouTube Music decides that I might like it after, listening to hours and hours of Weezer. But like, it makes me think too of after I was done with the work of listening to every single Weezer song, just listening to other music, and like bands like Cake have covered songs, and songs that I didn't even know were covers, like Perhaps, Sad Songs and Waltzes. They cover I Will Survive, which is really awesome. And then I heard War Pigs recently, and they're just all very different. And it's like, okay, Cake is a band that's similar to Weezer. Like, when I used to listen on Pandora, if I would do a Cake radio station or a Weezer radio station, it didn't really matter. Like, I'd end up with the same songs. So it's like, that's an example of how a band like that can cover a song, whereas Weezer just like does it exactly the same. It's like a karaoke version almost,
Yeah, and in our other podcast, Dan knows very well that I hate that when they do the karaoke version. And I'm in the same camp as you, where if they're gonna cover a song, they need to bring something new to it. Otherwise, I can just listen to the original one.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes my only rebuttal is, I mean, obviously that's definitely how you feel about it. You've mentioned that many times, but sometimes the artist's distinctive voice, it's kind of like you like hearing a song that you like from an artist that you like. But the problem with Weezer is his voice is not that great, and it only really works for his good songs. So when you're hearing him do these other songs, you're like, man, the person that sang it first was better.
Right.
So it's not only just a copy, it's like a lesser copy.
Right.
It's kind of like it's it's kind of thing where, oh, wouldn't it be fun to cover this song? And then people were like, oh, Africa's a great song. And then Weezer was like, so we just need to like cover a bunch of songs. And you're like, no, that's, you probably don't need to have a whole album of that.
Right.
But you know what? If you were them and you'd been doing it for 20 plus years,
right?
Wouldn't it be kind of fun to just cover a bunch of songs and go into the studio and record them and be like, oh, that was fun, guys. You know, like,
and
I don't know.
Aerosmith did the exact same thing. Apparently Aerosmith and Weezer are on the same path, but just 20 years later. But Aerosmith came out with the album Honkin' on Bobo, which is basically just all covers of, you know, classic blues and rock songs from, you know, the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But they made it Aerosmith's version of those songs, whereas Weezer just made it karaoke night.
And I agree that if, you know, hearing a song that you love from a different artist that you love can be enjoyable. But I also agree, Dan, that I wouldn't classify Rivers' voice as, you know, a wonderful singing voice. It's just, it works for that gritty rock band, as long as it's not too whiny. But yeah, you know, the covers that I heard, it was like, why am I not just listening to the original band? Like that's what I would rather hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's for true Weezer fans who love everything that comes out. Then you'd be all in. Like, it makes sense. But
yeah, right or die.
It's for Matt Damon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, all right. I think that pretty much covers everything, unless there's anything else you guys wanted to address.
No.
So I don't think any of us are Matt Damon style ride or die. Dan, you're definitely more Leslie Jones.
Yeah.
And I think Jamie Nair somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
I caught it on audio.